At this point, it is my honor, and I am so thrilled to have her with us tonight. I am here to introduce Christine Phipps, the president of NCRA. Hi, Christine. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone. On behalf of myself, Dave Winhold, the executive director of NCRA, the entire staff, and the entire board team of NCRA, thank you for having me. It's an absolute honor and a privilege to serve all of my stenographer colleagues throughout the nation. So they asked me to speak tonight about Zoom and web conferencing and how that has affected the pandemic. And the best place that I could really come from is I do own a company. My history as a stenographer, I started out as an official for the first couple of years here in Florida. And then I became a freelancer. I've worked all over the world. And I did provide a CART. I didn't do broadcast captioning. And then I became a firm owner 10 years ago. So with my firm, when we started 10 years ago, we were offering web conferencing. So, which means that we're not the traditional video conferencing, web conferencing as in what you're doing now. Back then it was WebEx. It was actually a break off from WebEx from some of the software developers. But so that's the first thing I want to say to you is make sure that when you leave school, you learn your software inside and out. It will serve you well, but that is only the starting point. You have to continue to look beyond what the world will change to, because make no mistake, it will evolve. NCRA is a 121-year-old association. We've seen it all. Wars, depressions, when women couldn't vote, to it's a whole different era now. Think about even 20 years ago, what you were holding in your hand that was a phone and what you look at now. So you can never, ever, when you finish school, don't learn what you have to do and sit there in the status quo, because eventually that status quo will not be good enough. And you have to continue to excel. And I will tell you that, you know, even as an owner, I look for, even in states, more than 25 states across the nation do not require certification. And Florida is one of them, and that's where I'm predominantly based. I look for certification. I don't need anyone to set a bar for me. I define my bar, and I suggest to all of you that you define your own bars as well. Because what that certification means, it means more than that you passed a 5-minute test. It means that you're continuing to educate yourself. You're attending things like this, and you're learning how you can be better and do better, and you're learning about technology. And so going back to where I started, the web conferencing, I gave a seminar about that almost 8 years ago at an NCRA convention as the chair of technology, because that's where the future was going, because it was the only way that we were going to be able to get back time in our day, right? Because we came from an era where we worked 9 to 5 and we shut.
I actually don't like these.
And we went home.
Thank you.
And that's all changed. And then it became we're on all the time, right? We've always got our phones in our hands. We're checking our emails all hours of the day and night. How else were we going to get time back in our hands? But even though my firm has been offering that web conferencing for 10 years, trying to get the legal community, who has traditionally, if you look back through time, and those who are on this call who've been practicing for a long time knows how lawyers and law firms can be, and judicial districts, they're usually 20 years behind the curve. For example, we deliver transcripts on thumb drives. We have people that still ask for CDs and DVDs. That's 20-year-old technology. So truly, the pandemic, you know, and actually in all times of when things happen that seem horrible, right? This is no picnic. Isolation is not to be underestimated. Being, you know, locked down, not being able to hug people, being there when our loved ones are sick, our kids in school and managing all of that, it's tough. But the thing is that in a sea of chaos offers tremendous opportunities. And that's what this is. And so traditionally, the court reporting industry has always had a struggle with, right, we don't tell people where to live. And all of a sudden, we have to take a depot in the dead of winter in the mountains of Colorado, where it's dangerous just to travel there, but you got to get to a deponent's house to take their depot. It's been very difficult to speak to lawyers and, and all of the people that work for them, and trying to get them to wrap their minds around letting us appear remotely. So this pivot truly is a blessing, because while it's still a little bit of the wild, wild west out there right now, because all the judicial districts, the states yet, even Supreme Court rules writing committees, they haven't written down the rules yet. What are, fair and best practices? Things like Zoom proceedings should be set up by a court reporting firm, the neutral and unbiased party. It shouldn't be set up by either counsel, because if you know the admin side of these kinds of platforms, it creates an unfair playing field. So those rules, they'll shake themselves out. But the most important thing, and actually to be proud of all of my colleagues out there, because it very much has been the court reporters that have helped the lawyers and all of the other people involved transition into this remote litigation world. It's been very much us that have been conducting the trainings and teaching them how to use the technology, helping through it, because that's one of the greatest things about this country, is that in times of struggle, we come together and we help one another. And at the focus was everybody just getting back to work and functioning, and we all of us earning a living so that we can keep roofs over our heads and continue to provide for our families. So while I have watched this over my career and the slow transition to technology, I mean, even real time, it was pretty heavy out in California in the early years. But you know what? It's swept across the country, and it continues to increase and be on the rise. That's amazing what Dom said about the increase in income in New York for her real-time skills. So that's fantastic. So make sure that you are increasing your skills with real-time and learning technology. But so as we have watched the legal community pivot to remote litigation, the wonderful thing about that is that, so for all these years that we've been offering it, which is a decade, we only had 10 licenses at any one time. When this pandemic hit, and we had been doing these web conferencing, Zoom or WebEx type proceedings all over the world in many different countries, but we never had like so many going on in one day. So at first we upped our license count to 30, then it became 50, then it became 100. Now we just had a day this week where we had over 100 settings set. We're all booked with Zoom. Now we've upped it to 125. Plus we have other accounts. We have separate accounts for WebEx and Teams. So it shows the increase, the rise in the request to work remotely. And the thing is that the remote is here to stay. And so it won't become, I don't believe, in the way I see the world, I don't believe it will stay as it is right now. We'll get through this pandemic. We'll come out the other side. And in some ways, it is a blessing that it has gone on for so long, because it's forced people into this transition. The work at my firm, I happen to have a lot of bigger type cases, things that involve a lot of real-time major trials. Our courts are open here, so we do a lot of tobacco trials and things like that. We're of course missing that type of work. And I do see we're missing a lot of the big real-time work as well. We do have some big cases. I see big cases going, but not all. I feel like, and in talking to some lawyers, that they have been waiting until January 1, because I think they were hoping to ride this thing out And there is that element of being able to cross-examine a witness or a deponent in person and what that feels like, the intimidation, you know, for them in the room, a video camera staring down at them at the other end of the table. So, but I think come January 1, I'm not sure that this is all going to be over by January 1. I highly doubt it, as a matter of fact. I think some of those cases are going to now come back to the table because they will have no other choice but to move them. So the good thing is that because it's forced everybody to be more open-minded about remote litigation, it's a pivot like you would see in like a birds adapting. I think it's the Canary Islands. It's escaping me at the moment. But it's an adaptation that you normally would see over a 50-year time span. It's forced the litigation world to pivot in a matter of 30 days, basically. And so now they're continued to evolve in this new normal. And so the great thing is that when we get to the other side of this, you know, I bet that 50% of the remote is here to stay. When we don't have a reporter down in the Keys, because there's not a lot of court reporters that live in Key West, Florida. They go down there to party, but they don't live there. We're going to be able to cover those proceedings remotely. Court reporters are going to be able to make more money when you're a freelancer, because those jobs that end quickly, you take all the drive time out of it. And so now you can just jump into another Zoom, and it's great. It has allowed us, even as a firm, as a business, to operate with greater efficiencies, because now when somebody gets hung up in hearing and they're not going to make their depo, we can just transition somebody else right in and cover. So it really allows for greater flexibility. I think people are liking that, you know, they can be home with their families and not spend hours on the road, especially when you live in bigger metropolises, like, you know, probably in New York City is one. Miami, Florida is one. I have reporters that they don't live in Miami, but they spend 2 and 3 hours getting to Miami and 3 hours getting out of Miami at the end of the day. That's 5 hours back in their day. Your money is made on that machine, not in editing. So imagine if you get back 5 hours in your day, what you can do with that, how much more you can report, how much more you can edit. So it is a sea of opportunity, and it's only going to increase. Don't ever buy into this stuff about audio recording. They were talking about that stuff when I was in school 30 years ago, and they're still trying to sell that ball of wax. It won't happen. And don't listen to the jargon and stuff you hear out there about that, because the thing is that when people write those stories that may appear in things like ABA journals and things like that, no one can acutely understand what it is that we do other than us, because we have that trained ear, one that, and eyesight, you know, for punctuation and grammar that you're going to develop even more so once you get out of school. But nobody else can really understand what it is to listen to every single syllable, because when we talk and we listen to people, we let lots of extraneous words go because they're not important to us in filtering out what people are saying. But when it comes to the record, every word is always going to matter. That's people's lives that are on the line, whether it's losing their right to their own life, or whether it's losing their business. Those words are never going to be negotiable, never. So there's always going to be a job out here for you. Make no mistake about that. So anyway, that'll conclude my thoughts for this evening. If anybody, I'll put my information in the chat. It's on my website. It's on the NCRA website. It's easy, president@ncra.org. I look forward to all of you being out there and working reporters. And, you know, so please keep in touch with me.